welcome once again to Crazy Comics and Stories. It's me.
Whoa! Stop!
Oh my God! Who's this other person on the podcast?
Make sure you're recording this time. I don't want to spend another 2 hours just to have you delete me. Delete.
I didn't delete you.
Delete. Sure, you just
Woken.
hook up in that Strode compound, you and this Pamela chick. I know what you're up to.
It was Woken Matt Hardy.
I could just phone it in if you want.
I wish you would have.
I got my phone.
I would have had to talk for an hour.
I got my phone right here. We could do it.
Well, it's me, your charming and delightful old Uncle Rat Bastard.
That's definitely right.
And at the other end of the series of tubes and wires that we call the internets is Joe, Crazy Writer. How you doing today, Joe?
Making a phone call. There we go. There we go.
And we can't hear the other end of the conversation, so this is going to be kind of boring.
Well, we could.
Oh, somebody's calling in the middle of the show. I never pick up the phone while I'm recording.
See, I told you. See, I called Cory, and that rat bastard won't even pick up the fucking phone.
That's right. I'm busy.
Thank you for calling. You've reached the phone of Cory Strode. Please leave a message and a phone number you can be reached at. Thanks. Bye-bye.
At the tone,
what a goody two-shoes.
Your voice message. When you are finished recording, you may hang up or press pound for more options.
Pick up the phone, you bloody rat bastard! Here. Okay, I'm done with the phone call.
Okay, that's good. Well, I had to cobble together an episode last week.
And it was all him, all the time.
No, you were on 20 minutes of it.
Funny how he finds a way to delete me. Delete. And after all the nice things I never said about you.
No, I kept those.
Oh, okay.
Said I don't like pie, lying
telling him
shit.
You're just telling him I went on a 45-minute rant and you had to edit it out. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're not supposed to talk about that anymore.
I was caught up. I was swept away.
She gets very angry when she hears that we're talking about her.
The Space Force be with you. I know, I just didn't feel clean.
I want to join the Space Force.
I don't, man. I'd get on that vomit comet. Have you seen that thing? It's like the jet flies straight up, and you're like, weightless, and then you go straight down and weightless, and it only lasts for 30 seconds, because if it did any more, you'd be out in outer space for real, or you'd be on the ground as a pancake.
Now, my question is, if we do have the Space Force, where our beloved president has said that he has ordered the military to start a Space Force, never mind all the treaties that would be in violation of. But my question is, what about the Zeta beam?
And what about those gamma rays?
And what about the cosmic rays?
Boy, you're going to wake up Galactus? I mean, we've been fine, which is leaving the Watcher on the moon. We don't want to get him torqued off at us again.
You know, what happened the last time we went into space? Skrulls.
Yep, we found out the moon wasn't made of cheese and we never went back.
And the Inhumans moved there just to get away from us.
Yeah. And Superboy started punching walls.
It's just going to be a mess.
I'm not for the Space Force thing at all.
Neither am I. Not unless, we get a space cabbie as well.
Yes.
Although, in the modern world, would there really be a space cabbie, which was a series by DC back in the 60s? Would it instead be a space Uber?
Or Lyft?
Well, a space Lyft.
On the other hand, we might also, Gruber and me might have our high school obsession and dreams come true by actually owning a real Green Lantern ring.
Ooh.
That would be fun.
That would be fun.
And then we could time travel, and we could be the first podcast, so everybody would be bowing down in how great we are.
We could start our podcast with Action Comics #1.
Now we're talking.
There you go.
So, okay, bring on the Space Force.
Now, my question for this week...
It's out to outer space. We're leaving Mother Earth to save the human race. Doesn't work without the orchestra in the background.
I was actually a little irritated when they announced Space Force because I got to be honest, I've been standing up on my roof for the past 20 years with a big sign saying, "Aliens, come get me." Bastards won't pick me up.
Kidding? They probably can't work their way through those omnibus. They're only aliens.
There's that too. But with the computer error we had last week, with Pamela deciding that at 20 minutes and 5 seconds she was done,
Yeah.
took the rest of the night off.
And it was a good show too. I mean, we were cooking on all cylinders. I mean, we didn't even stop to have donuts. I mean, but when Cory went to check on the podcast, it was like somebody took a bite out of each donut and put them back in the box. Terrible.
What does Charles Barkley say about that? It was terrible. Just terrible.
Terrible. Very terrible.
But it reminded me back in the old days of Hot Comics St. Paul, in the small store. There was one, I think it was a Friday, Thursday, Wednesday, I don't know. It was before I was coming in every Tuesday. But I came in, and Joe was brokenhearted. He was disconsolate. He was sitting there. And you might have thought that he was a horse, because you just came in and you'd say, "Joe, why the long face?"
The problem was I had just discovered all the defamates that I was stuck with.
He's gonna puke! He's gonna puke!
Oh, I thought
I was talking about the time when I came in, and you found out that there was something wrong with the computer you were using at the shop.
Yeah.
And you said, with customers around, "Fuck it, I'm having a sale."
Yep, time to have a sale.
So explain to the listeners, because you probably remember it far better than I did, because to you it was a lot more traumatic, and to me it was just kind of funny. Because that's how the world works. What's a tragedy for you is hilarious to everybody else. First off, why would it matter that you had a computer at the shop that died?
For me, I used the computer, and we're talking DOS-based programming, to track the subscriptions, and it would give me a nice little readout that I could go and say, well, how many copies of Action do I need? 125. How many people want maybe a specific issue of that one only? How many people are collecting all Superman at that time? So it was very crucial that I have this information. And I had made backups on it. And as the subscriber base got bigger and the titles got larger, it was easy to back up the customers. It was easy to back up their lists, but it was harder to back up the printouts for everything. It actually got to the point where how big were 3.5 inch drives held what? 5 megabytes, 10 megabytes?
Yeah, around 5.
The files, that file that had all that information got bigger than 5 megabytes. And this was before the interweb, so it wasn't like I could just back it up and, use it somewhere else.
In the cloud.
Now, of course, when you got to comic book day, I just reversed that and said, okay, how many people need Action? And then it would print out a list of everything. So I had an old dot matrix printer, and the night before, usually when Cory was working back issues and we were watching wrestling, I'd had everything printed out. So I'd have a stack of papers. Then the next morning when Butch or Mike or whoever came in to help, they would just grab that. We put all the comics out, and okay, I ordered 200 Action. We need 175 for the shelf. They would take 25, put them in a box, and then boom. That's how we did the subscriptions. And it was such an efficient program that even when I had Crazy Comics and DOS programming had pretty much died, I had one person, I think his name was Joe Moore, he built a DOS shell for me on my computer so that I could still run that programming. And I kept that as a backup, but I actually pulled out an old 286 that at the time I had the shop was like state-of-the-art, 1992. Now, fast forward 2006, I had this old dinosaur, and I still ran the subscription service and off it. It was just perfect. I mean, you could come in and say, all right, what's on my list? Okay, print it out quick. I think at that time, though, I was probably using an HP inkjet because the dot matrix had died and I couldn't find other ones. And so, yeah, this was kind of the life and the guts of the programming or of the subscription service. If you go back and you listen to the Solo Joe where I talked to Pat, this was like one of our major purchases. We had heard from one of the guys that Brian and Dan knew down in Florida. He used this to run his subscription, and it took him literally a day. That's how many people he had as subscribers to pull things. I mean, it took us a good 3-4 hours, which is why it was always a race to get the books back in time and try to get them out on the shelf and everything. And we used this program the entire time I had Hot Comics. I resurrected it when I had Crazy Comics, and I gave actually the 5 1/4 inch discs to Nick, because Nick just loved to tinker with DOS programming, so under the provision that if he found a better way of running it, to hand it to me. Never did, but now you walk in and everything, they have like these little iShare tablets. They gave me one. It's not even an iShare. It's actually a complete point of sale system. They gave it to me to use at the Comic-Con that was at SpringCon, or the charity booth. And you've probably seen these at small shops. It's just it's like a little pedestal, a little white keyboard. You turn around and you just sign your finger sign it, and they have a little thing they run the card through. And it's so cheap that they actually have 2 or 3 of them they use for the con. And I could see running the shop doing that, because you can program what categories you want. For example, when I ran it at the charity booth, they had MCBA admissions, MCBA pins, which they were giving away, the 30th anniversary pins, and then charity store, and then a miscellaneous category. So I would just, type in the amount, hit the category, do a total, swipe your card, you finger it if it was over $25.
Yeah, you finger it.
Finger it. And then it was easy to finger out.
I'm 12.
We would laugh at anything that sounds dirty. So, but, back then, in the olden days, I mean, I had a standalone cash register. When the video store went out of business next to me, I bought theirs because they had like 25 different departments. And I was able to split things up department-wise, new issues, back issues, graphic novels, T-shirts, soda, candy, toys, miscellaneous, whatever. It's just, now everything is computerized. I go to the source and they have it all barcoded and ready to go, and just, which is great for inventory, because, even back when I did it, we had 3x5 cards in all the graphic novels. So if you bought a graphic novel, I had to make sure that all the employees knew to grab that little card out and put it in the box. And then when I went to reorder stuff, I would go through and see which ones had sold, which ones I could reorder. I had the star system on it. Now everything's just, it's so much nicer. It's just computerized. I get my receipt from the source, and it actually uses the barcodes that's on the magazine and the comic. And of course, when they have weird ones that don't pop up, like some of the smaller press or some of the back issues, they just have it under Nostalgia Comics, not to horn in on their racket. So, but yeah, we were talking, this was kind of the dark ages of retailing. Still a lot more advanced than like comics shops and things like that popped up in the 70s and 80s, where they just kind of, you gave me $5, I threw it in the cigar box. That worked. But it wasn't quite a full-fledged point of system. So I could ring with the cash register, and then the computer system ran pretty much the subscription service. And I used it to make signs, and when the interwebs finally started to pop up, my guess would be 97, 98, because that's when I first got on eBay. So on like Thursdays, I would kind of do things on eBay, although it took a lot of time to do, so I didn't have a lot on eBay, but you get some neat back issues or something cool, just pop it on the eBays. And the other thing too is as to what prompted the sale. Back then, a decent computer system was about $1,500. It's not like now where you could go and I could probably get a $300 laptop and run everything I just talked about, and or even get something cheaper online. I was at the mercy. I think I went to just Sam's Club and just bought the entire system, which was always printer, keyboard, monitor, and of course the CPU. And I always went with desktops because laptops were really outrageous. If a desktop would be $1,500, the laptops were like $3,000. So yeah, I needed the sale to do that. And
the other thing about it that people don't quite grasp when you think about that, because that was over 20 years ago now, Joe. How's that make you feel?
I don't do the math.
But a dollar, with inflation and everything, if a computer costs $1,500 back then, with inflation, that we're talking around $3,000 of today's money, because that's back when comics were $1.99. Marvel was either $1.50 or $1.99, and now comics are $3.99. So pretty much, I tend to just think, okay, prices have doubled since then, and so you're talking $3,000, and for a small shop, that's a huge chunk of change.
That was my rent.
And then one of the things, we've talked about how you sold the shop to Brian, and then Brian kind of sneakily, weaselly sold it to Christy. And Christy always had cash flow problems. And when you first started the shop, did you have to deal with a lot of the cash flow problems of, okay, well, we're got to sell last week's books to get this week's books, and if there's a snowstorm and people don't make it in, we're a little tight.
Nope. Proud to say, when Pat and I started Hot Comics, we had a cash reserve ready to go. We didn't actually have a credit line. One thing that did help us out, because Pat worked at a bank, he was able to get a credit card machine. And back then, they charged like 3-4% a transaction. And banks would not give it to you unless you were in business a year. So small businesses didn't have access to it. Now, they trip over each other. You could go buy for $20 a PayPal thing that'll take all the credit cards, and PayPal will give you $20 back. So you just run it off your phone. Or again, that aforementioned machine I was blathering about, which, again, I'm not planning to open a shop, so I have no idea who manufactures it. But they just run the credit cards through it. So we had access to credit cards. We had, checks were big, and cash. I mean, generally, when it broke it down, we did probably, from our subscribers, mostly checks, because we'd only take checks from people we knew. And then it would be credit cards number 2.
In the memo line.
Not that we actually read anything you wrote. We just wanted to make sure you
get in trouble for any of the stuff I wrote?
Nope.
Oh.
Because what you forget is all that stuff is pretty much automated. It just they take it and it spits it out. They just confirm, because they say list checks separately at the time on the deposit slip. Yeah. So I say, okay, cash $1,000, 5 checks, and I list each one separately, and then they just go and check to make sure they have each check. They don't even look at anything else, and
that
it just
depresses me.
And the same thing when you used to send in checks to pay off credit cards and mortgages and big places like that. They have machines that automatically cut the envelope open, suck the bill and the check out, send the check one way, the bill the other way. The bill gets shredded, the check gets processed. Which is why sometimes you see those weird ink stains if you still get checks on the bottom. Now everything's so automated. I mean, a lot of that is that's old people talk.
Well, you can actually, my ATM that I use, because I haven't been inside my bank in years. You can actually, people give me checks. You just put them in the ATM. The ATM scans them and says, "Is this how much it's for?" Okay. Because I used to put fun stuff in the memo lines. I used to put, cracking hookers, drug habit, money laundering. I put all kinds of stuff in there. It's depressing that you never saw them.
Well, nobody else did either.
All those years of creativity gone.
I know. Well, that's the thing. You don't even get checks back anymore.
And one of the things that I listen to satellite radio, and there's some of the most of the music stations, no commercials. But on the talk stations, they have commercials. And boy, there are a lot of commercials for businesses who will say, oh, you need a loan? Here, we'll give you a loan, and then you'll pay it back by us taking a certain percentage of every credit card you run. Which, that's kind of scary when you think about it. But I was talking about how Christy didn't have any cash when she started. She didn't have any cash reserves. Was there ever a point where you needed to go and get a business loan or even thought about one?
I looked at it, but back then it was not an online process like it is now. It was real cumbersome paperwork, and you had to bring in proof of everything. That if you said I have a business that makes $350,000, you had to have proof of that. And I looked at what they wanted, and it was like I didn't have time to do it, because pretty much the time towards the end of Hot Comics, I mean, every day was a different day, and I had different tasks to do that particular day. And if I didn't do it, then we'd be in trouble. The only real time I got a chance to sit back was Thursday, where I would quickly read through all the comics that I was not collecting, but I still wanted to read, and I wanted to make sure that if I had the only copy, I wanted to make sure it was read and put back on the shelf. I mean, I didn't want it sitting in my to-be-read copy.
Oh, no, they're not
sell the
mint.
damn thing.
They're not pristine mint.
No, those are the bathroom copies. I won't tell you which titles which were bathroom copies.
I don't want to buy any of those.
Well, good thing you did. I mean, didn't.
Well, maybe you should send those into CGC, official hot comic toilet copy.
That sounds crap. Nevertheless,
crapper.
Red on crapper really.
ROC.
Forgot to wash hands. Red on crapper.
It graded at a 2.4.
Found out back outside. Left out back outside. Lobo.
My favorite was found under cupboard in kitchen.
Under cupboard in kitchen. We used to make just all sorts of. Oh, what's wrong with this book? It's Lobo. Left out back outside. NOCC, Nick. Abandoned on comic cover.
Now, so you looked into it. Now, if you would have gotten a loan, what would it have been for?
That's the thing. I would have had to stop and think, what would the loan be used for? You can only declare, at least at the time, a certain amount as operating expenditures, which is really what I needed it for. Even when I did Crazy Comics, I had a set amount cash, a set amount credit being a credit card, and if I went through that, then I had to stop and think, okay, it's about time maybe I think about closing up. And oddly enough, that occurred about the same time that that infamous month that I would discovered I'm getting no Marvels. I won't have any way to make my rent. A lot of times, small businesses were more, or the small business loan of, or banks, I should say. The banks would be tough because they don't really view comic books as collateral, nor do they view it as. It's all a matter of what you're buying. It's like if you're buying a computer system, if you're buying furniture, you're buying fixtures, displays. Even those would be tough as collateral because they what's the word I'm looking for? Starts with a D. Goes down in value year after year. Depreciations, yeah. So that's not stuff that they're looking for. They're looking for things like, I probably could have got a loan to get a van. I actually looked at that, and it would have better if I had gotten a lease, because a lease I could have deducted 100%. Whereas had I bought a van, and I was thinking of this to go to like different comic shows and stuff, I could only deduct what I used the van for, and that if I drove the van home and back, I couldn't deduct that. I really had to keep meticulous miles. Whereas with a lease, I didn't have to be that meticulous. It was wise to write it down. Like even with my own truck, I wrote it down. And but it at least would have been cheaper in the long run than outright buying it. So, yeah, a bank was pretty much out of the question. Small business loan administrator or small business administration, where you could get a small business loan, would be your next step. I'm trying to remember. I think it was you go to a bank, they refuse you, and then you go to these guys, say, "Look, I got refused. Here's what I want to do." You had to get your business plan going. You had to what you're doing it for, what you think your sales are going to be, what you think your basically, it's like replanning an entire business. That's what surprises people when they think, "Oh, I'll get a loan for my business." No, you're not going to, because it's real. Most businesses fail in a year.
Yeah.
Pat and I bought an existing shop, and even we couldn't get a loan. And Pat was working at a bank. If there was a way to work his way around it, he'd have found it. I mean, he found it for the credit cards. He just said it's just not something that they're interested in. It might have changed in the 2000s. Of course, we had a spectacular meltdown of the financial system. So
that was one of the things that they talked about. The reason that the Great Recession hit so hard was that a lot of big companies count on, they take out a loan for a few days to meet payroll. And, they take out a loan for a few days to do this, or they take out a loan for a few days to do that. And credit seized up, so they couldn't do that. And there were a lot of companies that got stuck in that crunch. I know I was working at a hospital, and you would think, oh, a hospital, they wouldn't have any sort of financial problems. They wouldn't have any of that. But the hospital group I worked for had planned that the state would give them a bunch of loans and grants to build a children's hospital. And they had built their entire business around that. They had already started construction. And then all of a sudden the state went, wait a minute, we already have 2 children's hospitals in the Twin Cities area. We don't need a third one, but ours will be better. That doesn't matter. We don't need a third one, so we're not going to loan you any money for it. So they had to go to the banks, and that was when credit has seized up. So it was like, oh, crap. We need to lay off 20% of our workforce. That was nurses, doctors, everything, because they had been counting on that governmental loan and governmental grants. And I imagine with small businesses, you don't hear much about comic shops taking out loans. But I know with Christy, because she was new, when she would run credit cards or checks, they would make her wait before the money was available.
Well, they did that anyways. They even did that with us. That was one of the things that when we worked with U.S. Bank at the time, and they were more expensive, but they gave you your stuff within a day. Whereas these smaller companies that they only charge, again, I said it was like 3-4%. At the time, there were these places that would do it for 1%, but then you'd get your money a little bit later, because what happens is these guys are playing the half a percent game. If they sit on your money, they earn that extra interest, then they get to keep it before they give you your money. And it's just one of those little things that was their business model. They said, well, instead of, whereas U.S. Bank would take 3% and give you your money today, these guys will only charge you 1.5%, but they'll give you your money in a day or two, because that extra 1.5%, that's where they're taking your money, sitting on it, and they get the interest from it. Because the money's never still. That was one thing too. Even what kicked people a lot in the financial meltdown was like, the bank gives you a loan, and they may look at you, okay, you're kind of a high risk, so we give you a higher interest rate. Then they turn around and they sell the loan off to investors under the guise, well, these are, high risk loans, you get better interest rates. And then when all these people stopped paying them, that was, the guys who bought the loans started to go under. And then, of course, banks still had more of these loans, and they couldn't find anybody to buy them. Anybody who's had a mortgage is, or even a car loan, you've seen where all of a sudden, hey, they just sold my loan to somebody. Or student loans. I can't tell you how many times my student loan was sold off. Ultimately, they all went to GE, Well, GE's now sucking cheese, and they're selling off assets, and financial thing is one of the things they spin off. So yeah, you owe the money, but there was problems too where they sold the loan, and if you kept sending the payment, by law, these guys you send the payment to are supposed to send it to who they sold the loan to. A lot of times they didn't.
Yeah.
And so in hindsight, I suppose it was cool that we got away from all that. We didn't do anything with it. There was a lot of cash on the barrelhead. The interesting thing you asked is what happens when I had cash flow, and that happened a couple times in the last couple years. And what I was able to do is I went to Diamond and I just said, listen, here's the problem. 9/11 was the perfect example. I mean, I called them the Thursday after 9/11 and I said, listen, I got no sales. I cannot afford the books you sent me. And they're like, yeah, we understand. The whole nation was reeling. They took all my outstanding invoices, and for the most part, I was on 2 weeks. When I did Crazy Comics, they offered, but I stayed week to week. Because, again, as we've talked about in the past, you could have 1 week where you got every single book on the planet. It's a big week. And then 2 weeks later, you got nothing. And you're trying to pay that bill. You use that cash you got that week for the big week you got 2 weeks ago. So it always made it kind of tough. The Diamond just took the outstanding invoices. We figured out a plan. They charged me an interest rate, and they tacked that on to the outcoming ones. And of course, I had to kind of watch that because I was also at the time working to sell the business to Brian. And the last day I paid the 9/11 loans was the last day I ran the shop, or the last week, I should say. And then the following week, he took over. And even if Brian pretty much took over my Diamond account until everything I sent petered out and his took over, which was good continuity for the business. When I closed Crazy Comics, there was about $1,200 of items that hadn't shipped because they were late pretty much late. And Diamond was basically, okay, well, you owe us this, we'll settle for 10% and it's closed. And there was a proviso that if you decide to go back into business, we may ask for that money back. And I know I could have probably sat down and, well, this is over 90 days, this is over 30 days, this, you can't count these things. But, they just taken 10% because they're going to take the stuff, assuming it ships, and pray to God they can turn around and resell it to somebody.
And if it's 90 days late, it's usually something expensive.
Well,
like a statue or a
I didn't get my JLA Avenger signed hardcover because that was the time when Christie faded away. I did get one finally through Nick at the source, and I suspect he might have just bought the remainder of her account. I don't know that for certain, but I just thought it was funny that suddenly, hey, I got one. So, there was some stuff I know Pat was talking about where I know Nick through the source actually floated her quite a bit.
Yeah.
And I know Pat did, and Pat took it in merchandise, and I think Nick probably helped out somehow there. And if he did it quietly. That's just the way he was. He wasn't, just helping a friend out.
I was there the first Wednesday when books showed up. And she thought books showed up and you pay for them, in 2 weeks, because that's what Brian had. And Diamond was like, no, this is COD.
Yeah, at least for the first
she
weeks.
Freaked out, had no idea what to do. An hour later, Nick is over. And he says, hey, Christy, come on, we're going to Perkins. And they weren't seen for the rest of the afternoon. And then the books were there the next day. So, it's one of those things where, we got to remember, Christy was in her early 20s. She'd never owned a business before, didn't know much about that stuff. And it became incredibly clear that she had been sheltered from that by Brian. Who, I'll sell you the business. He didn't tell her anything about it. He didn't tell her how business worked. He just, here you go. Here's my diamond account.
Yeah.
With a lot of shops, they've been around
and that was
for a long time.
way different when Pat and I did it, because we sat down and we looked at the book. So we looked at what he had, and the inventory we were buying, and the subscription list, and we met with his accountant. And this was before we were just interested in buying the business. And then even when we did the final purchase agreement, we had clauses in there from our lawyer, and yes, we ran it by a lawyer that said, you are not going to open within like a 10-mile radius of us. And they weren't. They were planning on opening on the other side of town.
Right.
But yeah, if you don't put it in there, look at what happened to the guys the original McDonald's guy, what's his name, opened a franchise right down the block from them, trying to put him out of business, even though he said he wouldn't, depending on who you agree with. But that's why you would prevent that. And of course, there's nothing to prevent somebody with deeper pockets on screwing you over. So, but again, that's not what Brian was trying to do with us. He wanted to get out of that neighborhood and go over to the other side of the world, thinking it was better. It must have been. His shop is still around. Not different owners, but yeah, different owners.
The other thing is that when you do these sort of deals, and it doesn't matter if it's comics, if it's creative, if it's anything. I was in a creative deal that was a handshake deal with someone. It was a handshake deal. It's like, you do this, I'll do this. Here we go. And I didn't care about the money, so I said, whatever money is made is yours. Because really, I didn't care. And then when it came time that the other person didn't want to do it anymore, it wasn't, hey, Cory, I want to dissolve this partnership. I'm going to give you this, and I'm going to take this. Nope, it was just, it's gone. I actually went to the website one day, and the website was gone. And there was no trace that it ever existed, and I was told I could never have a copy of the archives. And when you don't have anything in writing, a verbal agreement is as good as the paper it's written on.
And again, go back to the podcast that I did with Pat. We had, here we are, where we took our money. I quit my job at Sears. We were ready. We're going in with our eyes wide shut. And we actually had a thing. What if we decide to get out? And it's a real interesting story if you want to go look it up, because a couple months in, we decided we did want out. And that didn't work out. And then I decided, you know what? I'll buy you out, Pat. And we had an agreement thing where it was like, I know the money we dumped into the shop was going to be gone. I forget what they call that. And like if I were to give stock in a new comic company, I put a legal phrase in there that says, all the money you give me will be gone by the time we open the doors. So your stock is starting at a negative value. You are looking for future growth. It was kind of that way with Pat and I. We knew, I forget what we paid going in, but let's just say, I think it was $30,000. I didn't have $30,000 lying around to pay Pat, so we just had an agreement to do month-to-month payments with bonus. And then, of course, I gave Pat some free comics as well. And there were times when, again, I had a cash flow, and I go to Pat, I can't make the payment this month. He says, well, that's fine. It's just, I get the comics, I tack the interest for that month onto a future payment, or just move the whole payment back. So instead of being done in 2 years, it's now 2 years, 1 month.
Right.
And that type of thing. So, and Pat didn't care because he was getting free comics, and as long as I kept him in the loop what was going on. And that, again, that was in the business partnership agreement, and it did come into play. And that's what allowed Pat to get out and me to run the store another 8 years before eventually I did decide to sell.
I think one of the problems a lot of people have in comic shops, and maybe not as much anymore, but there have been a few that I've visited where, boy, it's pretty clear that this is just, I want to run a comic shop. It's not, I want to run a business. It's not, I want to, it's I want to run a comic book store. And if you want to last, you've got to go into it thinking, this is a business, I need to have a plan, I need to generate profit. Is this going to be my livelihood? Because if it is, I need to figure out, okay, this is my salary from this business. The old days of the 80s, when you do it all out of a cigar box, and as long as you pay your sales tax or close enough to it, they're going to leave you alone. Those days are long gone.
I actually had taken a course from, back then it was St. Paul TVI. I forget what it's called now, where my daughter's going to college. Small business management. It was just met one night a week for like 18 weeks. And I was the only guy there buying a business. And one of the things they did, they had a number guy come in, and on that same computer I was worried about that was dying, he did a guesstimate of how much money I needed to make. How much money do you make selling a book? How much of that is given away as discount? What are your expenses? I'd have all the stuff ready for him.
Mm-hmm.
And then he sat down and he said, based on this, you need to make this amount a month. And judging by the books that Brian and Dan gave us, we were making that. And, and that was something, too, that Pat and I figured out. Pat took a monthly draw. I took a weekly draw because this was it for me. And plus, we allowed ourselves a certain amount of sampling of the merchandise, if you want to be specific. So,
getting your beak wet. Just get your beak wet.
We want to see how it turned out. It's good in a brothel, not so much in a comic shop. But so yeah, all this stuff were things that we planned out, and even doing Crazy Comics, I didn't do so much of it in Crazy Comics because Crazy Comics was more of a, if I can get the fire lit on this thing, I can quit TSA and go with it. And I got it to break even. I could never get it to make money. And then forces aspired to show me I wasn't going to. So,
yeah.
And then of course when you get around to taxes, I mean, it's very, very favorable on your taxes. But again, and I give this one to Brian. He says, everybody's like, oh, you get to deduct everything. So yeah, but you have to pay for it first.
Right.
So if I got a $2,000 computer, I got to pay for it before I can deduct it.
That's the thing that people don't seem to get is, oh, you can deduct that on your taxes. Yeah, but that just means that it drops your income. So let's say it's a $2,000 computer and your income is $30,000. Oh, you're only going to pay income tax on $28,000. You still had to pay that $2,000. And as somebody who works in benefits and payroll and stuff, yep, you get all these pre-tax benefits. But that doesn't mean the money's still not coming out of your check.
Yeah.
It just means that, it's taken out before taxes are taken, so your income is less, so your income taxes are less. And because of that, there are all sorts of rules around it. I can't tell you how many people I talk to, they have what they call health savings accounts, which is a pre-tax account that you can put money in that you could spend on eligible healthcare expenses. And there is the IRS has a list. Here are eligible healthcare expenses. It used to be much more forgiving to the point where it's like, oh, I have money in my Flex Savings account. I'll just go to Walgreens. I'll buy bandages and I'll buy a first aid kit and I'll buy this and I can use that money for that. Well, you can't anymore. But there are people who, well, why can't, I don't need it. Why can't I just spend that money on this? Well, because it's not an eligible healthcare expense. What are the rules around it? And when it comes to businesses, there are a lot of rules. And I can't tell you how many shops in the 80s ran afoul of such rules, where there was one shop whose name I will not divulge under penalty of death, where the owner basically found out he was going to be working to pay for his mistakes for at least 5 to 7 years, because he'd kind of ignored sales tax.
Oh, yeah.
Because it was in Illinois, and there's no sales tax on periodicals. Well, not everything he sold was a periodical. Those trade paperbacks, even the Marvel graphic novels, those aren't periodicals. Those are books. Or, this. Well, that's a novelty. It's not a publication. Here in Minnesota, clothes. There's no sales tax on clothes. But if you open a thrift store, not everything you're selling is clothes. And back in the 80s, people didn't watch that very closely because, it was a little more of a free-for-all. Now, there's a lot more regulation, there's a lot more involved, and while people complain about it, it also is really good at making sure that your business is run professionally, rather than just, hey, I got some stuff. Think about those shops in the 80s you go into, and they weren't run professionally. And anymore, one, because of competition, and two, because all the regulation. The people who get in and last for more than 6 months, 12 months or so, they don't look at it as a comic shop where this is my life stream to sell funny books. No, it's, well, this is a business, and this is a business I know, so I think I can make money at this business.
And that was always an advantage Kristen had at Hot Comics Richfield, and then who eventually bought New Hope, is she was not a comic fan. She was a business person.
Right.
So she looked at it like a business person would. Matter of fact, she asked me what I thought about when she was going to buy Hot Comics Richfield from Brian. And at the same time, I think Brian was selling St. Paul to Christie.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I said, you must have seen something in it to make money, because you're, of all of us, I said, you I could probably outmatch you in comic book knowledge, but you are much more shrewd when it comes to the business end of things. Which is why of all the pieces of the Hot Comics puzzle, I don't know is who approached Christie, and I don't believe it was her. I don't know if she was looking to sell the business, because the guys who bought the Hot Comics and own them now, they have comic book roots somewhere. I think the one guy is like the great-great-grandson of Stan Lee or something, because there's an actual...
He's like a nephew or...
twice removed or what. Yeah, because he's got a thank you note from him.
More related to Martin Goodman than he is to Stan. Stan's part of the family, but he's one of the Martin Goodman... he's a direct descendant from Martin Goodman, is what I've heard. And one of these days, boy, I'd like to sit down with him and ask about the family stuff.
Oh, I've left messages with him. Adam was going to try to get a hold of him, and like I said, I think I know where Kristen disappeared to, but I don't really want to bother her after 20 years and say, hey, you want to ask a quick question? Well, she might be cool about it. I don't know. But, yeah, it's just one of those things. So if you know these things, or you happen to be the owner of Hot Comics, give us a quick call so we can finish the story.
Because there's one piece of the Marvel story that I want to know about.
Oh.
Back in the 60s, late 60s, Martin Goodman sold his business to, I think it was called Perfect Film, and later it was Candace Industries. So, you remember seeing the CCC on the Marvel books. That was Candace's logo. And it was a sale that took place over years. So at a certain point, Martin would be completely out of it, and he felt that his son Chip would be put in charge. And he planned it that way. But, as we talked a little earlier, it wasn't written down anywhere. So 1972 comes, Martin Goodman is out. Within a week, his son Chip Goodman is fired. And Stan Lee is made publisher of Marvel Comics. And of course, they sold off all the men's sweat magazines. They didn't want anything to do with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, they just wanted Marvel.
Men sweating. Ugh. You can only have so many sumo wrestlers on your cover, and sales drop.
Actually, there's a Frank Zappa connection, because one of the most famous covers of a men's sweat magazine was called Weasels Rip My Flesh.
Ah, I've got that album.
But they got rid of Chip, and Martin Goodman was so pissed about it, he said, fine, I'll start my own comic company, and I'll run all you...
But crackjack and hookers! Yeah, forget the hookers.
That company was called Atlas Seaboard. So that's why Atlas Seaboard came to be. And he was offering rates almost double that of Marvel and DC. And that's why they went out of business so quickly.
Take that, Martin Goodman.
Well, you know who doesn't go out of business, Joe?
Anybody connected with Facebook?
No, Facebook businesses go out of it. I
Oh.
can't tell you how many of those Marvel fan hoodies where I'll save it and go, oh, I'll take a look at it later. Then I go 2 months later, it's like, oh wow, the whole website's gone.
It's gone.
No, it's these guys, our sponsors.
Ooh.
That's right, here at the Solitaire Rose Radio Network, we have ads, and our first sponsor is me. That's right, your charming and delightful old Uncle Rat Bastard. I have my first book out with Dangerous Dan Moore. It's the first 100 strips of our online web strip, Worldwide News, the story of the lowest rated cable news network. And you can get yourself a copy with commentary, with all sorts of extras, with signatures and everything. Just email Dan over at lordshadowflame@gmail.com. Our top sponsor, who's been with us since day one, is DreamHost. DreamHost.com. You need yourself a website, and DreamHost.com is the #1 web host in the whole known universe. Just head over to DreamHost.com, put in the code KRAYZ, KRAYZ, get $20 off your first year. How can you beat that? Our other sponsor is Graze, GRAZE.com. Healthy snacks for a healthy lifestyle. Just head over to Graze, put in the code CORYS3R5P. Your first and fifth box are free. You can get them weekly. You can get them bi-weekly. You can get them monthly. You just order a whole bunch of them. It's great stuff to keep you away from the vending machine at work. Now, if you would like to leave a comment for any of the podcasts that we do, we'd love those. Go ahead and email us at solitairerosenetwork@gmail.com, or you can call 952-856-0519. Operators are standing by. Okay, it's just a place that will record your calls, but we'll play them on the air. We'll answer your questions. We love getting feedback. Tell us what you think. Ask a question. Suggest a topic. Be a guest. Send us your stuff. SolitaireRoseNetwork@gmail.com. If you would like to advertise on any of the Solitaire Rose radio shows, you can. Just email us at SolitaireRoseNetwork@gmail.com. Subject advertising. Thanks. And after we talk about the sponsors, I do plugs for the upcoming shows. Did you listen to all the shows I did last week, Joe?
No.
Not only did I pretty much salvage the episode of Crazy Comics and Stories, because we can't miss a Monday.
Nope.
Then the next day was a new episode of Bad Advice with Wolfie and Cory, because I worked over the weekend and wasn't able to mix it until Tuesday.
Well, that's bad.
And then on Wednesday or Thursday, I'm not sure, it depends on how long it takes, I the new episode of Solitaire Rose Radio with Bill Shelley, who wrote Tales of Wonder. And then on Friday was a new episode of Novelcast. So I kept busy last week, Joe. See what happens when I don't sleep at the group home? I just become a podcast machine.
Yeah, and then he totally forgets to keep Pamela awake and erases our wonderful podcast that we spent hours upon hours doing.
Well, we spent 45 minutes slandering someone, so I think it's good that we got rid of it.
Well, he deserved it. Don't care if he is president.
No, it wasn't him.
Oh.
It's somebody you call it.
Don't care if it was clean.
But I read some comics. So
you did?
Talk comics before we go to eBay?
We could. Usually I put that in my freaking geeking, but I'll go with that.
Because we've been talking around the comics.
Well, let me see. Because there are some of the comics you probably can't talk too much about because I haven't got them yet.
Well, have you read Spider-Man 800?
I did.
That was amazing.
I have one beef with it, but I'll save it to the end.
Okay. A lot of people are complaining that it's a $10 comic, but it was 80 pages of story.
And it was a complete story. It wasn't like, okay, the only part that deals with the current storyline is this part, and then we're going to put 5 other chapters that have nothing to do with it, even though they might have creative teams that are really cool. No, this was one solid story.
And 80 pages, that's 4 regular comics. So it could have been $12.
Yeah.
But nope, it was 10. And it made Marvel the #1 publisher in the month of May.
And it was definitely a good swan song for Mr. Slott.
Yeah, there was a lot of where it went back to certain things, but there was also a lot of things that changed. A major death,
That's the only thing I'd beef on.
And the thing that really blew me away, it was, well, first, we're now back to, we're pretty sure Aunt May knows he's Spider-Man. Because Aunt May says to Peter, there are some things that we just don't talk about and are left unsaid. No, she says that to Spider-Man, that there are things that we don't talk about and are left unsaid. And I like the fact that they're kind of hinting that she knows, but they're not coming out and saying it. Because back when I started reading Spider-Man, I loved the idea that Robbie Robertson knew that Peter Parker was Spider-Man, but didn't want Peter to know he knew directly. So he would just hint about it, like, gee, looks like Dr. Octopus is attacking out there. I wonder if there's going to be any good pictures of Spider-Man there, Peter. But I also like the new status quo between J. Jonah Jameson and Spider-Man. Because without J. Jonah Jameson as the publisher of the Daily Bugle, really his hate of Spider-Man hasn't done anything. It hasn't really meant anything. And Dan Slott spent a long time building up that J. Jonah Jameson has respect for Peter Parker. Even though they're quote, family, unquote. But I like that Chip Zdarsky over in Peter Parker, Spider-Man told him his secret identity. And rather than Jameson, pissing and moaning about it, it's like, well, you know what? My problem with him was that he hid his secret identity. Now I understand why. And as a story beat, it works. And I really hope they don't wave their hands and make it all go away at some point. I want that to kind of stay the status quo, because it works. And the whole Norman Osborn thing worked for me. It was an excellent story that ended Dan Slott's run. And when you think about how long Dan Slott was on the book, Jesus God.
And they owe a great debt of thanks to Batman and Robin.
What?
Well, yeah, that's what happened at the end of Batman and Robin, remember? Jim Carrey as a Riddler, I know who Batman is, and I'm Batman.
Oh.
So they pulled out the Batman and Robin ending.
Have you read the first 2 issues of Man of Steel?
Now, my beef with Amazing Spider-Man, and that's what we put this as a spoiler, is...
Well, the whole thing's spoilers.
Well, pretty much. But, I didn't buy that they had to kill off Flash. Fine. I mean, Flash kind of came into his own when they gave him Venom, and he was part of Guardians of the Galaxy, and he actually started to be the hero he probably always dreamt he was. And then they finally revealed that he figured out who Parker was, and I thought, oh, this is going to be so cool. No, they kill him off by the end of the issue. So we never really get to see that payout. And we see some of it, back before Brand New Day, when the world knew he was Parker. I mean, there's some good stuff that Peter David wrote, especially when J. Jonah Jameson, first he faints, and then he goes ballistic, and then they have their final meeting. Dr. Octopus goes insane. A teenager! I was beaten by a teenager! So, there were things they could have done. I don't know. I guess I don't feel Flash's sacrifice was as big and noble as it really could have been. And I guess I wasn't looking for a death. And to me, again, this is old school. What was the issue we found out that Aunt May died?
196.
No, forward from that, where she really died.
400.
And when later we find out, no, it was just an actress playing the role of a lifetime.
Yeah, I hated that.
Yeah, and, okay, that was, to me, the last time I accepted, okay, a character dying in comics. Because that was a good issue. They had closure, and they finally got away from this whole, okay, she's 1 trillion years old and having a heart attack.
And the good thing is they have not returned to that trope.
No, which is about the only saving grace. Yeah, the only saving grace to having her. And again, I think, again, this is comics. Hey, he was part of Venom. Maybe a little symbiote still in him. He's going to come back to life. Maybe could have.
Yeah, but if I wanted to bring Flash Thompson back, it would not be hard.
Yeah, but again, I didn't like it. I thought it was gratuitous. Didn't need to be. I would have actually enjoyed some banter between Flash and Parker, especially when he goes back, oh my God, I can't believe I got in a boxing ring with you. How did you not kill me? But you turned your head. No, you hit me. And you could have some real fun with that, but it is what it is. Slott has moved on. And, it was a solid, damn entertaining issue.
Have you read Man of Steel yet?
I did. I got number 1.
And what did you think?
I have enjoyed it. I don't have it in my pile here, although it was there last week when everything got deleted. It was much better than the little snippet they gave us in Action Comics 5 billion, was it? 2 million? I don't know. There was a
Action
big
Comics 1 million. Oh, wait, they printed that.
Wait, they did that one, yeah. So, and this kind of, where whatever happens in the action is still to come. And so it's kind of building up. And I know it's weekly, and of course I got to wait. Let's see, where are we recording this? So I got to wait, 3 weeks before I get to see the next 6 parts? I may just go down to the source and pick up a variant cover of it, that way I can sell the variant cover and still be reading the story, because it is, bi-weekly, or is it actually weekly?
It's weekly.
Yeah, so I'm
like
already
the, John Byrne Man of Steel was.
Yeah, I'm already a bunch of issues behind on it, but that first issue I did enjoy. I like the idea of different people flirting with Superman. Now, if I'm right, now this is the Earth 1 Superman with married Lois and Super Son?
Yes.
Okay.
Lois is missing.
Uh-oh. It's her fault.
Well, there are 3 plot lines going. The first is this alien who hated Krypton and might have been involved in it blowing up. There's what's going on with Superman right now, your regular Superman stuff. And then the third storyline is Lois Lane is missing. And in Man of Steel number 1, you get kind of, okay, we're leading up to whatever happened to Lois. And I like the fact that Bendis is doing 3 stories at once, and he's cross-cutting them in a way that it doesn't feel choppy. And the original Man of Steel miniseries was John Byrne basically saying, okay, I'm remaking Superman. This feels more like I'm setting a tone for Superman rather than, okay, at the end of this you will know everything about Superman and everything has changed. Here you go. This is more, okay, this is the world that Superman is living in now. And it's changing up some of the older stuff. It's setting things in motion. It doesn't feel as big and as sweeping as Byrne's Superman, Man of Steel. I do like it. The art in the first issue blew me away. Ivan Reis is just such a great artist. His stuff feels big.
I do like the
Neil Adams big
exchange between the firefighter Melody Moore and Superman, where he's flying away and she goes, "Nice to meet you, Superman." And he stops and looks back, and she's like, "Stupid super hearing." So that was kind of a neat touch.
I did finish reading the 10-issue series Contest to Champions.
Ooh, you can talk about it, because I probably, unless you say something otherwise, have no interest in reading it.
It's mediocre at best. I wanted it to be more than it was.
So you're saying a Marvel?
I'm saying it's read it on Marvel Unlimited like I did. They introduce a few new characters. They make the Maestro into a really cool big bad guy, and knowing how Marvel works, that means he'll be back. He'll be back. And but no, overall it was a nice little time waster. But it shows me the problem Marvel has,
which is
when it came out, I heard about it. It's like, oh, that sounds interesting, but I'm not paying $4 an issue for it. And for these 10 issues, that's $40. Now, back in the 80s, when comics were 50 to 75 cents, I wouldn't mind picking up a book that was just kind of mediocre and self-contained, and it's a nice little time waster. But now at $4 a pop, or if you wait and buy the trade paperback, $20, you need more bang for your buck. You need more something that feels more than just, okay, this was a nice little side story with a bunch of characters we probably won't ever see again. And I think that's one of the reasons why Marvel and DC have to do these big events all the time, because when you're laying out that much money, it's different from, okay, this is some pocket change, or, this is a couple of bucks. This is $4. Or, this is a special size issue, so it's $5. You want something bigger for your $5. And so that's why I think a lot of midline books and a lot of books that are, they're entertaining, but they're not must read. So your borrow books are the ones that fall by the wayside when comic prices are so high. I read the first issue of Mark Waid's Doctor Strange,
which I haven't gotten yet.
I liked it, but I think the central premise...
He's in outer space.
Well, the central premise is a little too close to what Jason Aaron did. And we'll talk about it when you get yours, but it really felt like, this story would have been a lot more special if there hadn't been a story just like it 3 years ago.
Did you read Invincible Iron Man 600?
I have not read it yet.
Oh, okay.
But I hear it wraps up a lot of Bendis stuff.
It's the same thing. It wraps up some stuff. It leaves some things. There's a few characters I'm not pleased with how they ended. But, again, we'll wait till you read it. Worst thing is to give spoilers to each other.
And the last book that I read
Bendis did it.
The first issue of The Immortal Hulk.
Ooh, I haven't gotten that either.
And what it is, they're doing Hulk as kind of a horror comic.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by that, although we did have a horror writer on Hulk before.
Yeah, this is a very different sort of horror than the Bruce Jones. I was going to actually bring that up. With Bruce Jones, it was kind of told as... Bruce Jones did a lot of work for Creepy and Eerie, and then in the 80s he did Twisted Tales, and he told that style of horror. This is a very different horror story. This is a more modern horror story, and it's more kind of Hulk-focused. And in the essay he writes in the back, he talks about how he read the pocketbook of the first 6 issues of the Hulk before he read any other Hulk story. So he read that, and it's like, Hulk is a scary, scary individual. And then when he picked up a Hulk comic, it's like, well, he's kind of just an angry kid. And it didn't feel the same. He wanted to go back to those early issues where the Hulk was kind of a scary Frankenstein monster type creation. And I think in that first issue, he really captured it. And it's a good first issue in that it felt like a complete story. And yet it left enough threads open that you were like, oh, I got to know what happens next. So between that and Doctor Strange, Immortal Hulk was by far my favorite of the new number ones I've read. And Joe, now that I've talked comics, what's going on the eBays?
Comics!
Really?
Yep, been selling lots of them. Actually, most of them I sold last week. Because, I went on and on and on, talking about all this cool stuff I sold, collections that are gone, where they came from, and, they conveniently were deleted. But this week, I sold a couple of them. See if Cory knows these titles. Cory?
Uh-oh, is this an Ask the Strode?
It is.
Okay, for a shiny new dime.
And hang on, let me see. Nope, sorry. All I got are 2 nickels. Tell me about UN Force.
Oh wow, I don't know that book.
That
sounds like a very 90s book.
Let's take a look. Dun, dun, dun. All right, you get a nickel because it was from a place called Gauntlet. 93 to 96, it was published. And U.S. Force is basically an international group of super-powered beings whose purpose is to help the UN. And they did 5 issues, a limited edition, and
5 issues over 3 years.
I know. The guys on AtomicAvenue.com liked it. They said it was good fluid writing by the creator Brent Doran Carpenter. artist Paul J. Kowalski, but never last. So, and I had a collection. I just put her up, and it doesn't sell right away. Okay.
Now, aren't we Americans supposed to hate the UN?
I don't know. I haven't watched the news lately.
Because I do know when I read my Thunder Agents comics, it's real clear who was in the UN in the 60s and who wasn't. Because Thunder Agents were, agents from the United Nations. Every time it was the Red Chinese. And then you go back and you read, oh yeah, China wasn't involved in the UN in the 60s. No wonder they were always the bad guys.
Well, okay. That's a very philosophical thing. Cory, tell me about Action Philosophers.
Action Philosophers is by Fred Van Lente, and it's a wonderful comic. I adore this comic so much. I actually bought the trade paperback for my mom. They tell the life story of philosophers in comic book form with a lot of humor, but also with a lot of information. And it goes through the history of philosophy from, before the Greeks, to the Romans, to the Dark Ages, to modern philosophical thought. I always wanted to take philosophy classes, but I also know that if you get a degree in philosophy, you have two jobs available to you. One is to teach philosophy, and the other is to know the zen of cleaning toilets.
Yeah. The artist on the series was Ryan Dunleavy? I'm not sure, but they did 9 issues. There's 3 books, the deluxe set as well as the deluxe hardcover, which actually has 1 through 9 and 4 news stories. So you probably want to get that. The deluxe hardcover, it's titled More Than Complete, as opposed to the other one's just the complete. So, okay, Cory, here's your other nickel. And if you want a chance to earn a nickel, or better yet, get some cool comics, check me out on the eBays, Krayz. Send me a quick note. Let me know you're a fan of the show, and I'll do something nice. Like, I'll reach out this way, and I would probably include this copy of American Flag, Southern Comfort as a freebie. That assuming you like that. I mean, if you say you bought Action Philosophers, I may give you another issue of Action Philosopher, free of charge. You just don't know what kind of, or I might just give you free shipping. I'm that type of guy.
Now that we've done Joe's favorite part of
my favorite part of the show,
we get to my favorite part of the show. No, not where I delete everything Joe said.
Oh, I like DuckTales.
It's freaking and geeking. Joe, what are you freaking on?
You can do it yourself. We had this big, wonderful program about our previews and what we recommended and things like that vanished into the ether webs. And of course, one of the freakings I had was that I did not get a previews catalog. Not because Discount Comic Book Service screwed up, but because I ordered the order book instead. Because there are you just can't get one piece out of and get all the previews now, because you got the previews catalog, the Marvel catalog, which is separate. I think the previews catalog comes with a free issue of Image Plus or whatever, Marvel, which I didn't get. I didn't get the Marvel thing either in the previews, although I did get it somewhere else. So it's kind of like I got 4 parts, and the 5th part is the order form, which a lot of people don't use. And I used to like it just because in the back they would have a little thing about which stuff's been canceled and why. Canceled by publisher, canceled by Diamond, out of stock, which is always helpful for me because, like when I was talking earlier about my subscription service, every so often I'd go through and discover, hey, why didn't this guy get this? Oh, canceled by publisher. So I guess a lot of that's online now. I'm so old. I talked about Amazing Spider-Man 800 and not like the idea, we got to kill off Flash. The only other thing bumming me out is I'm still got pain in my hip. It's driving me up the fucking wall because it's hard to work, hard to walk, hard to sleep, hard to sit. I'm going to a chiropractor tomorrow. I think I'm just going to go to regular MD and see if there's another thing that can be done to help me out. Because after last night, man, I was up all night, and not the Ric Flair way either. That's pretty much all I'm freaking on. Cory, what you freaking on?
Really, the only thing I'm freaking on, that I haven't already talked about or posted about online is that I still have not had time to go see Solo or Deadpool 2. And I'm now at the point where it's like, well, why would I want to pay full price for it? I'll wait till it shows up at the $2 movie theater. And with Deadpool, it's like, oh, well, I was able to just order it. So I get the DVD, I get the Blu-ray the day it comes out, and I'll probably do the same thing with Solo, except my problem with Amazon with ordering the Star Wars movies, the Last Jedi, I wanted to pre-order that, so it showed up day of. No, they didn't have it available for pre-order. You'd go to Amazon, they go, oh, not available yet, not available yet, not available yet, not available yet. Then when it was available at Target, it's like, oh, hey, we've got it available. Well, I could drop by Target and buy it. I want to pre-order stuff. Because
sometimes you should. Target usually has a little extra stuff with their things. I used to every week when this stuff would come out, I'd check Walmart, Amazon, Target, and Best Buy. And you decide who's got the extra stuff. Lately, it's always been Target. They have an extra disc with extra bonus features. Best Buy has the tin set version. If you have a collection of those, they look pretty cool. Not as much freebie stuff.
I just want to order it and have it show up at my house the day it comes out.
See, my problem with that is that those movies you mentioned, you really got to see them on the big screen because they just don't translate well onto the small screen. I mean, there's been plenty of them where I've done that where it's like, oh, okay, I saw it on the small screen. I should have waited and see it. I should have gone and saw it in the theater. So, especially Solo. I'll talk about that when we get to geeking.
But yeah, it's just not enough time. Not enough time.
Apparently your money's not good enough.
Apparently. But also, like I said, at the group home, they're going through a lot of change. We actually counted up how many people had turned in their notice.
Change!
And 5 people turned in their notice last week, Joe. And there are 4 or 5 people who've said when the company shifts over to the 2-bed and 4-bed facilities, they're not going to work for them anymore. And they've already told the company that. For me, it's like, they're going to give me a $1,000 bonus and I get to keep my job?
Omnibus heaven!
Yeah, damn right. So, I wrote an essay on Facebook, and I do this every so often, and there's a reason I do it that I'll talk about with geeking. But I wrote an essay on Facebook that's not, philosophical. It's more, here's what anxiety feels like. And when we get to geeking, I'll explain why. But starting Saturday, I started having one of the worst anxiety attacks I've had in a while. And it's not because of any reason. I'm overstressed. Last week was way busier than I wanted it to be. The podcast screwing up also, wasn't a helpful thing because it was like, oh crap. I always have to have an episode on Monday because I promised people that. What the hell am I going to do? So, I spent a lot of today kind of gritting my teeth and getting through so that I could get it. Joe, what do you...
I finally got a copy of the incomplete Death's Head number 12, which was the only issue out of 12 I was missing.
And that was the one that reprinted the original Death's Head comic, right?
With the exception of the Doctor Who appearance, which hence the incomplete Death's Head. And most of the framing mechanism is Death's Head 2 talking to the programming of the original Death's Head, because if you remember, 2 kind of basically absorbed number 1. So this was kind of their way of getting everybody familiar with it. And I actually have the original ones, so I don't have to, worry about the incomplete stuff, unless someone, of course, buys my collection, which is sitting on eBay right now. The question for Cory and this shiny, 10 pennies, since I don't have any dimes, what caused Death's Head... I'm sorry, I said that wrong. Imagine me screwing up somebody's name. What caused Death's Head to change from a large Transformer-sized robot down to a more humanoid form?
I never read the book, so I don't know.
It was the Doctor. the first time they saw the doctor. He used the master's tissue compression thing to shrink Death's head down. Because when he first showed up, he was hunting Transformers. And then this all, of course, occurred in the UK Transformer and is probably never, ever going to be reprinted, because that's not only Death's head's first appearance, but his first run-in with the Doctor. And I believe that was I don't know if it was the sixth or seventh Doctor. No, I'm sorry. Because it was the seventh Doctor he met in the Death's Head series that we've been blathering about. So it was the previous version for that. Because the cover's pretty funny. Death's Head says, I will offer to kill the Doctor for free. No. So, last week I was geeking on that I had gone to 2 graduation day parties for friends of mine. And what was interesting is that all of us have, not only that we have kids that are graduating at the same time, but it means that obviously, 18 years and 9 months ago, we all had sex about the same appropriate time. So, hooray for a coincidence. But I took the day off from work, and I got to go visit some friends and see some people that I see way too little of nowadays, and impart my advice onto the young grads as they're heading out into the world. And of course, what's really depressing is that these guys actually know what the hell they want to do in class versus me, who just kind of went to college to go to college, because back in the 80s, you just went to college because if you could go to college, you went to college.
Nope, I knew what I wanted to do.
Yep, and look where you ended up.
I worked in juvenile justice, and I worked with teenagers for 20 years.
Now, Cory, do you remember from the deletion what I told these graduates?
I don't, but I told you the 2 pieces of advice that I give graduates.
Which is?
Well, the first piece of advice is your mouth can't get pregnant. The second piece of advice I give is what I give to all people. It's from Animal House, from Dean Wormer. Fat, drunk, and stupid is no way to go through life, son.
You'll get yours, smart guy.
So
My
what's your advice?
Is from the Shat, a.k.a. William Shatner. Say yes to everything. No, don't say yes when somebody offers you a gallon of Fireball followed by that half a ton of cocaine. No. Shatner talks about that's how he's run most of his acting career, is by saying yes to everything. Because when he was offered the chance to be on Boston Legal, he was like, I don't really want to do it because I don't want to get tied down into a weekly series again. Well, if he hadn't said yes, he wouldn't have won his first Emmy. And it's kind of the same thing at the graduation party. I mean, really, I had a day off, and my friends, they were like, one lived down in Red Wing, one lived in Chaska, and if you know your Minnesota, there's no easy way to get from Minnesota Red Wing to Minnesota Chaska. And it's just,
we made it that way, god damn it.
I know, but I found a way. And had I not said yes, I wouldn't run into some other friends who took the day off, other friends I haven't seen in years. Basically, I had my book of Minnesota maps, and we were following it until it got outdated, and then Chris tacked her Google phone into her car, and we just followed the arrow, and it wouldn't say things, but it would tell you things like turn in 1.3 miles, and we discovered a back route that would have cut my way down by half. Of course, we didn't get to go to Hot Comics Jordan, but that was a different subject. I voted. It's my fault. At least I hope it is. Disney, because I own stock in their company, sent me a proposed merger. Your vote is very important. And I might have been too enthusiastic. Hell yeah, buy Fox 20 for 20th Century Fox. What are you waiting for? Stop mucking around. Buy it. Now, since then, I know Comcast has outbid them. I don't know if Disney re-outbid them. They were supposed to, I think the deadline as of our recording is tomorrow. So by next week, I'll find out whether or not they listened to my sage advice. Unfortunately, yesterday, being Father's Day, Cory, how was your Father's Day, by the way?
I worked.
I was supposed to, but my hip was so painfully locked up, I just stayed home. And what sucks is I don't have a lot of sick time because I've been having problems with the rheumatoid arthritis. I'm on the, what do you call it, Family Leave Medical Act. So they're not supposed to give me hassle because they know this will happen occasionally. But we'll see what happens with it. But I did get enough gumption. I went out and visited my father, and at the same time, my brother and sister were there. So it was kind of a neat mini family reunion. Got to talk. Ma had, I guess she makes like a crock pot dinner so that way Dad can eat whenever he wants, and so that was kind of a fun little thing. Again, I just said yes. Believe me, I was saying a lot worse as I was trying to drag my ass into my truck, but and that wasn't it. I did go see Solo today. Oh, I don't know what the hate is for this movie. It was fun. It was Star Wars. It was amazing. It was. I mean, the guy I was with is like a huge Star Wars guy, and he's not really pleased with the two main movies. He did like Rogue One, but he thought Solo was great. He said, I don't like he doesn't see the hate that people were giving it, or why. Yeah, I think it's not going to be this way. I'm not going to support it, dudes. If you're a Star Wars fan, you should really check this out. And trust me, there are so many deep Easter eggs that I know I should have probably had my buddy Turbo on to talk about it, because he probably would have caught 90% of those. Most of them were just things mentioned in passing, and then I go back once I see the show. I'll go and look at here are the Easter eggs you probably missed. And in the case of the Marvel movies, I caught most of them. In the case of Star Wars, I really didn't catch much of any of them. Plus, I had to go look up like some of the characters. Like these characters are acting like they had history before. Did they or didn't they? So I enjoyed it. If you're a Star Wars fan, get off your guff and duff and go see it. That's pretty much it for me. How about you, Cory? What are you geeking on?
Well, the first thing I'm geeking on.
Is the recording good?
Yes, we are still recording.
Geek on that.
Second thing I am geeking on is Michelle Wolf, who some people really hate because of what she did at the press association, the White House Press Association dinner, and I loved her because of it.
Yes.
She has a show on Netflix, and she talked this week about the suicide of Anthony Bourdain, and how when she was working on Seth Meyers' show, he was the only celebrity she wanted to meet. And she talked about how a lot of people on social media make their lives look perfect. Every picture is a beautifully posed selfie. Every story they tell is how wonderful their life is, how perfect their relationship is. And it's hard for people who, some days you're putting your dirty laundry on top of your clean laundry. Because you just, hey, I could just, wash my t-shirts, or I'll just go buy some new ones. Not that I've ever done that. But she challenged people to take a picture of themselves and say, I kind of feel bad today. And to also put how many times you took the picture before you said, okay, this one's good enough that I'll show people. To kind of put out there that it's, no, not everybody's life is perfect. And it's one of the reasons why on Facebook and Twitter and in my blog, I'm kind of brutally honest about what's going on in my head, which probably scares people because you don't want to know what it's like in my head. But I use social media very differently, I guess, than other people. I don't do it to go, look at me. It's more, you know what? These are the things I think about. This is what I'm going through. Yes, I found out I have generalized anxiety disorder. Wow, that made a lot of sense. So I talk about what it's like to go through life with that. And there are some days where my spider sense is going off the whole day, even though I know nothing's wrong, everything's fine, and what it's like to deal with that. And I think if more of us were more honest about our lives, and maybe there's a movement for that now, where it's not, here's this picture that I made sure the lighting was perfect, and I've covered up my flaws with this, and then I've run it through 5 filters so that you see me exactly the way I want to be seen. Instead, it's just, no, this is who I am. This is what I am. We'd probably feel a little better about our lives because we're not comparing ourselves to perfect people all the time. Comic-wise, Cory goes from deep philosophical to, ooh, there's funny books. That DC will be announcing that Tom King is doing the next big DC crossover. And it is, he has given an interview, and we'll talk about it more next week, but he's given an interview where it's like, he was over in Iraq. And he knows all these people who've been there, and they've dealt with the trauma of being sent back to war 2 and 3 and 4 times. And he wanted to kind of bring that to the world of superheroes because he sees those characters as going through those sort of traumatic experiences all the time. And Tom King has done, phenomenal work. He did the Vision, Omega Man, Sheriff of Babylon. He's doing the best run of Batman since Grant Morrison. And his Mr. Miracle is the best run of Mr. Miracle since Kirby. So he's one of those writers who anything he does, I'll buy. I sent Joe a list of Marvel Masterworks. Joe, did you get that list?
I did.
Those were all ordered from cheapgraphicnovels.com. They're selling off Golden Age Masterworks. There wasn't a single one of them that was more than $20. And there were some, these are the hardcovers. These are the $75 hardcovers. There was one of them, I think it was $9.99. Most of them were $12 and $13. So I did the math. I have almost $1,200 worth of Marvel Masterworks hardcovers going to be showing up at my door that cost a little over $175. How can I not geek about that, Joe?
Well, they don't hold their value as well as an omnibus.
I don't care. They're Marvel Masterworks. Those are my first love. I take that back. The Russ Cochran EC books are my first love.
Now you're talking.
Those were the books where I went, oh. And the last thing I am geeking on, and it's kind of a tease for what's coming up in the future, there is a new comic book company out there, Joe, called Ahoy Comics. Have you heard about this?
Hang on a second. Let me look on my list. Oh, comics.
They're not out yet. They were just announced last week.
Oh, well, then I won't look.
It's two former editors of Vertigo are putting out a comic book line. Each issue is going to be 40 pages. It's not just going to be comics. It's going to be comics and short stories and articles. And they say it's going to be more of a magazine. I don't know if that means it's going to be magazine size or not. But some of the creators they've listed are Grant Morrison, Linda Medley, Jamal Igle. And I was so excited when they announced this. And we'll talk about the books when we do our previews episode, our next previews episode. You know, the one where I cut you out, Joe? Can that be our running gag now? Joe's gone. But I'm going to talk about it then. But I also emailed them and said, please put me on your press release list. And I am lining up interviews with the creators. I already have two of the creators who've promised interviews when we get closer to their books coming out. So look to hear a lot about Ahoy Comics from me as it comes closer to them coming out. And the last thing I'm geeking on, I had to go to Target.
You could have got Star Wars then.
No, because it was, okay, I have to go to Target because I have to pick up a couple of things.
But did you do the Target where they bring it out to you so you don't have to go mix and mingle with people?
No.
I am very disappointed in you.
Because it was like, okay, I have a half hour from one job to the next job where I have a little bit of time. I need to pick up stuff so that I'm not eating, burgers
They
from the gas station.
They made it perfect for a hermit like yourself to avoid human contact by bringing it out to your car. But no, you totally blow them off and go, no, I'll walk into your store and do it myself.
Okay, first off, I get very irritated when you call me a hermit because I would love to be a hermit.
That's true. You do
I would
shower.
love to be at home. But I'm not at home.
I got about a dozen keys now. I got to start giving them away again.
Hermits are at home. I am not home.
Hermits don't have a home. They just sit in one spot and this is it.
No. They have caves. They have homes. Hermits stay in one place. Caves. I am never in one place and I am That's one of the things that I don't think people understand. At my part-time job, I am always interacting with people. I am always dealing with people. I'm always helping people and doing this stuff and trying to understand what they're saying when they have speech impediments and all of this. At my full-time job, I am getting phone calls all day. So yeah, when I'm not at work, I really don't want to be around people that much because I'm people.
But you see, the problem is you're not around real people. You're around phones and you're around developed disabled adults. Those are not normal real people. So you've got a skewed view of people anyways. I mean, at least when you used to hang at your coffee house, before they kicked you out because you weren't drinking coffee, I mean, you were at least hanging
me out because they don't allow computers there anymore.
Brilliant. That's a good model to have. Anyways, I thought you got up and asked to use the restroom. But anyways. You can use it.
No, I started cleaning.
Yeah. Anyways, that's the point I'm making is, it's kind of like a guy who hangs around, you just hang around with bad people all day long, like maybe cops do. Yeah, you get a skewed version of reality. Not everybody's that way. Got to get you some friends. Who wants to be Cory's friend? Raise your hand. Bueller?
I stopped at Target.
Be buying it.
Joe, have you been to the book section?
What book section?
Any of the book section, because it's all really small now. What
DVD section? Modeling the stores, and the stores that haven't been remodeled have a nice DVD book section. The stores that have been remodeled, even Best Buy, it's like, no, you're not going here to buy DVDs.
Yeah. But in the young adult section, I would say a good half of it is made up of graphic novels, and there's an entire big line of books that I doubt any comic shop in the Twin Cities that have sold hundreds of thousands of copies. There are all these graphic novels that are aimed at teenage girls that aren't superheroes or this or that or the other, and when I see these people online who comics are dead because they're not focusing on me. Guess what? There are all these companies that aren't focusing on you that are selling hundreds of thousands of copies, and they don't care about you. Comics will last. They will. I promise. They just may not aim at the 50-year-old fanboy who's been reading comics since 1972 and is really pissed that Ms. Marvel doesn't show her navel anymore.
Navel. And that was during the year when Cher couldn't even show her navel.
Well, on TV.
Oh, yeah. But comics were way ahead of the curve.
Well, and it's John Buscema drawing somebody's navel, so if it's John Buscema drawing a sexy woman, hey.
Navel Wars.
Hey. Well, believe it or not, kids, you've listened to us blather on about funny books for an hour and a half, and I haven't gotten rid of Joe.
Yeah, there's still the editing due.
Well, yeah, there is that. So, as we say every week, the comic we like the least, we still like better than the comic that you like the most. Joe?
Time to ask the Strode.
I wasn't ready.
You weren't, because it comes from everywhere. Let's see. Here's your chance.
RKO out of nowhere.
Let's see. I'll give you, a quarter. You can owe me 15 cents later. I will start the quote, and at any time you recognize it, buzz in. And if you guess it before I get to the end, I'll give you the whole quarter. I'm feeling generous because, haven't deleted me yet. Did you ever want to set someone's head on fire just to see what it looked like? Did you ever stand in the street and to think to yourself, I could have made that nun go blind just by giving her a kiss? Did you ever lay out plans for stitching babies and stray cats into a perfect new human? Did you ever stand naked, surrounded by people who want your gleaming sperm, squirting frankincense, soma, and testosterone from every pore? If so, then you're the bastard who stole my drugs Friday night, and I'll find you. Oh, yes.
I do not know what that's from.
Warren Ellis, Transmetropolitan, Volume 5, Lonely City.
Oh, okay.
Hit my music.
It sounded like Warren Ellis.
You're probably just going to guess as soon as he said gleaming sperm. Warren Ellis.